Hello TYT Sports, it's me Josh Poino here with another WWE video. Today we are talking about SummerSlam. SummerSlam 2016 is officially in the books. One of the big four pay-per-views of the year is officially over, and where does that lead us? Well, it leads us with a really bizarre ending. We're going to talk about that ending here in just a second, but SummerSlam is supposed to be one of these pay-per-views that starts us down the road to WrestleMania. It's supposed to start setting up some feuds we're eventually going to see here in the next few months as the biggest show of the year starts to come into picture. We didn't really get a lot of that here, or at least we don't know that we did. The very first match, though, on the card for the evening was ENZO and Cass versus Chris Jericho and Kevin Owens. Now, ENZO and Cass, things have been going extremely well for them over the last few weeks, so my guess was that they were going to lose this match. Why? Because they can. They have such great momentum that a loss here isn't really going to affect that. The crowd isn't going to suddenly not get behind them because they're fantastic in the ring, they're fantastic on the mic. Every crowd that they played before absolutely loves them. Jericho and Kevin Owens are a recently formed heel tag team, so getting them a victory doesn't really do much for them one way or another, but it definitely helps ENZO and Cass in the revenge department. And sure enough, the team of JERIK.O ends up getting the victory, but ENZO and Cass will survive to fight another day, and that's perfectly fine. Next, we had the first women's match on the card, and that was Charlotte versus Sasha Banks. Now, I thought that Sasha was going to win. She was going to keep her title. So Sasha only got this belt not that long ago. Less than a month ago, she was crowned the WWE Women's Champion. So I figured there's no way they're going to have her drop the belt less than a month later to Charlotte. And I was wrong, because she ended up losing. Now, this match did have a really great spot. One in particular, Charlotte tried what looked like a razor's edge from the top rope to Sasha, and Sasha ended up reversing it, and it was a really nasty bump, and I give those women all the credit in the world. It was fantastic. It looked great. I did think it was a little bit weird that Sasha kept trying to get one over on Charlotte, and then Charlotte would just roll out of it. She would just find a way to escape, and eventually Sasha Banks had her in the bank statement. Charlotte ended up rolling over to pin her shoulders down, and she got the win. Still think it's a little bit puzzling. However, there may be a reason to this. There's a method to the madness here. According to more internet rumors, things like that, Sasha is not booked to perform again until the 23rd of September. She's taking a hiatus off. She's not been suspended or fined or anything like that. She's just taking some time off for rest or recuperation. Next, we had The Miz versus Apollo Crews. This was a really short matchup. It wasn't one that got a lot of build-up. Apollo Crews was named as the #1 contender not long after the draft. There wasn't a lot of big back and forth between the two men. The Miz did most of the talking just because that's what he's really good at. Apollo Crews is getting better at it, but he's still kind of green in that department, so you didn't really get a lot of the standard, hey, I'm going to beat you, no, I'm going to beat you kind of stuff, which is usually something, especially for a title match. So I certainly didn't expect Apollo Crews to win this match, and spoiler alert, he didn't. The Miz retained, go figure. His wife, of course, was involved in interference, as typically happens whenever the Miz is in a match, and he retains his Intercontinental belt. So nothing really earth-shattering there. Next was CENA and AJ Styles. This one was going to be very interesting for a couple of reasons. First, my guess was I wanted AJ Styles not only to win this match, but he needed to win clean. And the reason is because he needs that way more than CENA needs a victory here. It wasn't long ago, just a few days actually, that CENA said on a WWE podcast, he's looking for someone to take his spot in the WWE. And this wasn't a work, this wasn't kayfabe, this was him genuinely saying, look guys, I've been doing this for a really long time. I want someone to take my spot as the top guy in the company, but I'm not simply going to hand it to somebody. They've got to earn it. Now, do I think AJ Styles is that guy? Not in the sense that he's going to be the dude at the Make-A-Wish Foundation. He's not going to be the guy hosting the Today Show. That whole aura of who John Cena is, all those other intangibles that occur outside of the ring, it's going to be really, really difficult to find someone who can replace Cena in that regard. But as far as who can take his spot at the top of the pecking order on the depth chart, and absolutely AJ Styles is more than capable of doing it. These two men had a fantastic match, and at the end, AJ gets the Styles Clash on Cena and then hits him with the phenomenal forearm and wins the match. Wins it clean, no interference, no nothing. Then we had an interesting moment at the end. AJ Styles leaves. The crowd, which is initially the Brooklyn crowd here at the Barclays Center, which was initially a little hostile towards Cena, as most older crowds tend to be, they were showing a lot of respect for him, a lot of cheering. I think people knew that they may have started seeing the end of something, because Cena took off one of his never give up armbands, laid it in the ring, and walked out. Jon Stewart came out, which was, I love Jon Stewart. He's fantastic. He's very talented. But celebrities coming out in these kinds of things are all very strange. And he got a really cold reception from the Brooklyn crowd. He comes out and introduces the New Day, who had their match versus Anderson and Gallows. This is another match that I figured the heels were going to come away with the victory here, simply because New Day had no reason to retain their belts. They've had the belts for too long. It's about time for someone else to get them. And again, I was wrong. Big E ends up coming back at the end. Big E had been sidelined by Anderson and Gallows, so they thought they had sort of leveled the playing field, but turns out that they hadn't. Even though technically Anderson and Gallows won, they don't get the titles. So this is just another setup for a future rematch, and I still think that Anderson and Gallows could be the ones who strip the New Day of their titles, because it's about time we kind of get this division something a little fresh. Next, Dean Ambrose and Dolph Ziggler. I thought this match was going to steal the show. I thought it had the potential to steal the show, but it just seemed very vanilla. Dean Ambrose seemed like he was going through a lot of the motions. It never seemed like Ziggler was a real threat to him during this whole match. It almost seemed like he was bored. Just the faces he was making, the way he was acting, it didn't really seem like at any point he thought he was going to lose to Dolph Ziggler. And he didn't. Dean Ambrose retained the championship. I didn't think the belt was going to change hands anyway, but I would have liked to seen a champion in peril at least a couple of times. Make it compelling, make it interesting. Just didn't seem that way. Next, we had Finn Balor and Seth Rollins. The WWE wasted the opportunity to introduce an audience to Finn Balor who didn't know him from NXT. His demon entrance is very unique, and it's part of his unique identity. And WWE ruined it by having it on Raw already. So the crowd already knew it was coming. It would have been so much more meaningful if they had just saved it for this show, for something as big as SummerSlam, and for a match as big as this, which unfortunately was ruined with the debut of the new Universal title, which looks horrible. There's a reason why it wasn't giving a special introduction on the show. There was no grand unveiling. There was nothing like that. It was just the camera went to commercial after the last match and then cut back, and what do you know? The Universal Championship is there. And it looks horrible. It looks just like the WWE World Heavyweight Championship, except it's all red. It's insane. It looks absolutely terrible. If you have to Google it, do so at your own risk, because it just looks garbage. Complete garbage. And I think unfairly that took away from this great match. Balor and Rollins put on a fantastic competition. They had some great spots back and forth, great high-flying moves inside the ring, outside the ring. And every time they cut to a shot of that title, or the guys that showed up near the title, the crowd would boo because they just hated it. I mean, it was bad. Everybody on Twitter was reviling against it. No one had anything good to say about this title. So I don't know if WWE's going to take that to heart and actually do something about it, but it just doesn't look like it. They're probably going to run with it, and we're going to be forced to look at this awful sacco of a trophy for a while. Let's move on. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Anyway, Finn Balor got the win, and he's your first Universal Champion, but really he's kind of a loser for having to wear this belt all the time. Ugh. Okay, now we start in one of two of the questionable endings to this show. Roman Reigns and Rusev were supposed to have a match for the U.S. title. Now, they had already had a match on Raw this previous week. So why are they fighting again? Roman Reigns had won that, but it wasn't for the title, so now they're going to have another match for some reason. Now, in the world of professional wrestling, hey, you guys can't start beating on each other until we ring this magical bell. Then you can officially start beating on each other. So, it's one of those things where you have to suspend your disbelief. So the match hasn't officially been sanctioned as starting yet Roman Reigns and Rusev are beating on each other, and then refs come out and try to separate the two men. They can't successfully separate them because they keep wanting to fight. Eventually, one of the refs just calls the match and says he's disqualified because Roman Reigns won't stop, and Rusev is declared the winner. Okay, very odd. And then Rusev he can't compete because he's hurt, so he can't even compete in a match. So Roman Reigns seems to leave. He comes back, spears Rusev again, and Rusev is down for the count, and now he's really hurting. And then Roman Reigns leaves. That was it. No match, no nothing. Wondered why they didn't do this in reverse. Maybe that could have happened on Raw, and then they had this match here. Again, a questionable decision to say the least. But hey, they'll make up for it in the last match, right? Brock Lesnar versus Randy Orton. Surely that match will put the show over the top. You know what? I don't even need my notes for this. This is how terrible this match was. Okay, all the hype, all of the fanfare, that was going into this match, Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton, these guys have only met one time back in 2002 where Brock Lesnar ended up being the victor. Then they both went on to these phenomenal careers and blah, blah, blah. Yes, all that is true. So, with that being said, there is still no way in the world that I thought Randy Orton was going to win this match. It's simply not plausible. There's no way that he should win because Brock Lesnar has been built up to be this unbeatable monster, this killing machine that cannot be felled by human weapons. So how can Randy Orton, a very human man, go in with his very human fists and beat him? It's simply not going to happen. So they have their match, and it seems that that's exactly the way it's going. Brock Lesnar is beating on Randy Orton unmercifully. And then Randy Orton is able to get in an RKO out of nowhere, but it kind of goes back and forth just for a little bit. But Brock Lesnar is still really controlling the match. And here's where the unusual thing happens. They're in the ring, and Brock Lesnar just punishing him with elbows and forearms, and next thing you know, Randy Orton is bleeding like a sieve out of the top of his head. Now, ever since the WWE left the Attitude Era, Vince does not condone cutting. If you're not familiar with the term, cutting is when a wrestler will intentionally bleed themselves, called cutting or blading, especially right here, the soft parts over the head, where you can get a whole lot of blood and it doesn't really hurt them that much. So it was very effective and it's very showman-y. However, Vince is not about that anymore. He hasn't been about it for years. The WWE has not been about it. It's their official policy that they simply don't do it. Now, they can't always prevent you from bleeding unintentionally, but they definitely try to stay away from it. This is supposed to be more family friendly. So having buckets of blood everywhere that would belong on the cover of Fangoria magazine isn't what they're going for. However, that's what we got at the end of this match. I mean, Randy Orton had a literal puddle of blood under his skull. So medics had to come out, and Brock Lesnar, to his credit, was keeping kayfabe, and he would occasionally throw the guys to the side and beat on Randy Orton and all that stuff. But there was no question that this match was going to be called. As soon as you started to see this big pile, I said, there's no way this match continues. This has to be ended. It's just now it's a safety hazard. Sure enough, match was called. Brock Lesnar wins by TKO. Match is over. A very disappointing end to what was billed up as a phenomenal match. I understand you can't always control things like that. I don't think Brock Lesnar intended to cut Randy Orton. Randy Orton certainly didn't cut himself intentionally, but it happened. And because it happened in just the right place and it was so severe, the match had to be called. And now we did not really get the match we were promised. Whether or not we're going to get a rematch of that at a future pay-per-view, or they're just going to end the storyline there and kind of move it along and go with whatever plan they were going to go with anyway, which I still think was going to involve a Brock Lesnar victory, remains to be seen. But that's how SummerSlam ended. Did you watch SummerSlam? What did you think? Were you disappointed? Were you happy with SummerSlam? Were you not happy with SummerSlam? Which matches did you enjoy? Which matches did you not enjoy? Let me know in the comments. As you know, I respond to every single comment that I can, and I will try to write back with whatever comments you have. Let's start a great discussion in there. You can also follow me on Twitter right here at Chief Joshiola. Send me any questions, comments you want right there, and hopefully TYT will have me back soon.